Our guest today is Rowanna Erickson. She is extremely knowledgeable about polygamy because that's where she came from. Hello, Rowanna.
Hi.
It's wonderful to have you here today.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be a part of this. Anything to get the truth out there.
Today, right now, in the state of Utah, they're arguing about decriminalizing polygamy. What do you think of that?
I think it would be a crime to do that because of all of the laws that are being broken and the people that are being harmed living polygamy, especially children. It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. There's nothing beautiful, spiritual, wonderful about polygamy. It's all a big facade for a criminal act.
Please explain how polygamy harms children.
Number one, they're taught to lie from day one. They can't ever tell the truth about who their father is. And most of the time, they don't even know until they get older. And the mother has to lie all the time. The child lies. He's born and raised in a lie. Polygamy is not of God.
So these children know so little about their father, they really don't grow up with a real father relationship that's normal, do they?
No, and I feel sorry for the boys, because when they become fathers, what are they going to do? They don't know what it is. And it's like my kids. They had to call their father by his first name, and the other families called him Dad.
So they don't have a relationship with the father that claims them as their child?
No. And he's afraid to claim him as a child or show any affection for fear someone might see it. Plus, he didn't know how to do it because his father was a polygamist, and his father was, well, back in the early 30s, 40s, Eldon Kingston, and they didn't know diddly squat, to be perfectly honest. They just didn't know about relationships, about love, expression of love. They didn't know how.
Well, the bonding in polygamy is not really allowed.
No, you can't show it. And I'm sure it's difficult for some of the fathers that they're allowed to show it for some of their children, but not all of them. So that's hard on them.
Well, I've had polygamous women tell me that the only way that they could cope is to withdraw any feelings they ever had for their husband, because otherwise the pain was too severe.
I can imagine that, yeah.
So where's the bonding?
There is none. Not even with the children when they're born. I think bonding with a child at birth is really important, especially for the mom and the baby. And but polygamy was all about keep your mouth shut and do what I tell you.
Well, so many of the mothers had to share the workload because they have so many children that they can't support them. So many of the mothers had to go to work, and then the one at home would have all these children to take care of. When they had the Warren Jeffs things, a lot of those children didn't know who their mother was. They had all these mothers, but they didn't know who their biological mother was.
No, that's criminal. That's so sad. And see, they thought what they were doing, they could do anything they wanted, and it was right, because they were these chosen few. And they saw themselves as a chosen people. So whatever they did, no big deal.
Well, the human rights violations in polygamy are what? Tell us what they are.
There's a lot of incest, a lot of sexual abuse, intermarrying in that the incest, because they intermarry because they want to keep their bloodlines pure. And
don't they understand what that really does?
They don't want to. They don't want to understand. They ignore it. And some of them really don't care. They just do it.
What are the results that you've seen from this interbreeding?
Some of them have been born with different deformities, and I feel so bad for the mothers and the children. But they just think they're this chosen people. They can do whatever they want. And many of the women during labor, they need medical help, and they won't get it for them because they're afraid of being caught. So the mothers just suffer or die.
So they're actually having these babies without professional medical...
Exactly. And they don't know how to get help, nor do they want to. My sister was a midwife, and she helped them a lot. And Lorraine Kingston, she delivered over 3,000 babies in her lifetime.
All of them polygamous babies?
No. She did doctors. And a lot of people that were just wanted to have home births. And she was very good at it. She had a sense of when the baby needed help. And plus she was a nurse, LPN, and she sensed when they needed medical help, and she wanted to get it for them. Sometimes they wouldn't let her, and that was really hard on her.
It's wonderful that she was there and even sensed when they needed it.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate that nobody cared. But my sister, Irene Spencer, helped deliver babies in Mexico, and she had no experience except they needed her. And more people kept calling her when they had a baby, and that's the kind of medical help they got. Bless her heart, she went to do what she could to help out her friends.
Gosh.
But she didn't have any nurses training at all.
No, my sister did. She was a real good nurse, and she had the ability, she had intuitive. She knew almost exactly what was going to happen and what to do about it. And she never lost anybody. She never lost anybody at the birth.
That's wonderful.
And she just had a gift.
The average man has a hard time supporting one large family of 6 to 10 children.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how these families survive financially.
Many of them have to go on food stamps, go on state assistance, and you have to lie to do it. And lying, it makes you feel guilty or wrong. If you're an honest person, I did. I felt wrong. I felt like my whole life was a lie. It was horrible. And how to live. Thank goodness my father was not a believer in this stuff. Mom was, but Dad wasn't. And Dad really helped me a lot. He was there for me.
How did your mom come to be a believer?
She was LDS, and Dad was Lutheran. He came from the East.
So your mom came up through polygamous families in her upbringing then?
No, she didn't, but she heard about them. And she believed in Joseph Smith, and she believed that what he taught was still true about polygamy.
Wow.
And she wanted to believe that, but my father, it was rather difficult because he didn't believe in it.
That's unusual. It's usually the man that decides what he wants.
Mom had common sense in a lot of ways, but she allowed their religion to override what she knew was right. And she did it because that's what she thought the priesthood had the power to tell you to do it. And you should do it.
Many women have told me that their natural feelings of jealousy, pain, hurt, emotional hunger, desertion are simply weaknesses to overcome, and they have no right to them. Have you heard that?
I hadn't really heard it like that verbatim, but they excluded women's feelings because that made them weak, when actually they were being compassionate. The truth was manifesting, but they were taught to overlook it. and to not really use those inherent capacities. Because the priesthood says you shouldn't do that, so you better not do it.
So emotion was not allowed?
No, and for me, I just stayed tough because I was born between 4 boys in my family, monogamous family, and I loved my brothers, and they were good to me, and I was good to them.
How did you get into polygamy then?
My mother wanted to join the group when it started in 1935, and because she heard that the day would come when polygamy would come back to the earth, and so she was looking forward to that. And then, of course, this particular group, the Kingstons, stood up, Charles Eldon Kingston, and he thought he was the one mighty and strong. Of course, his father was teaching him a lot of BS, and they were just narcissistic people without feelings and emotions.
Isn't it true that a lot of the women, like your mom, are taught that they have to live polygamy to get to the highest degree of glory, or they'll lose their salvation, that their salvation in heaven depends on polygamy?
That's correct.
So they do it because they are afraid of eternal damnation.
Mm-hmm.
Are the little girls taught from the moment that they're born, all their life, that this has to be the way if they're going to be acceptable by God?
Not where I came from. They didn't talk about it openly like that because we affiliated with the outside world, we called it. And we weren't to talk about it out there, so we had to guard the kids, what they were learning and hearing, so they wouldn't forget what they were doing and just talk about it out in public.
When I was a kid, we were taught also never to talk in front of the outside
Mm-hmm.
world or let them know who we were, because they were dangerous and they were wicked and they would lead us astray.
Mm-hmm.
But we were taught very seriously, as long as I can remember, that if we didn't live polygamy, our eternal salvation was at stake.
I was taught that when I got older because I couldn't comprehend it at a younger age. But my mother kind of guided me along there and the religion. But thank goodness for my father. When I look back with him, he had more sense than just about anybody. He knew inherently, deep within himself, it was wrong. He could feel it. He knew it was wrong. And yet, he was from Illinois, and he was out here in Utah, so he had to do and be of their ways. And I don't know how he survived it, but he held a pretty good position in the Kingston group.
What are the consequences for a girl for her not living polygamy if she's born in a polygamous family? What happens if she decides that she doesn't want to live polygamy?
Well, she isn't going to get eternal salvation.
In some of the polygamous families, some of the things that happen are complete devastation to the woman's life. How severe was it in the Kingston?
I don't remember that so much as the fact that women were working their socks off. They were working so hard all the time because they had the sole responsibility of supporting their families and feeding their kids, whereas the husband was off copulating with other women.
Right.
And so she had to do it all.
Increasing his posterity to
Yes.
become a god.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, big haughty.
And isn't it a part of their belief system that copulating with many mates makes a man a god, and the same behavior would make a woman a slut, deserving of destruction?
Oh, man. Yeah. I've thought of that, too.
Today they present like Love Times 3 and in Sister Wives, they present that polygamy creates more love. Well, it creates more romance and sex eternally available for the husband. But in every case of polygamy I have ever seen, the women have less and less and less of a husband of love and emotion in their life, and more responsibility to support themselves and each other as time goes by while he's off copulating with his...
Yep.
Is that what you see?
Oh, yes, yes. They're just...
I've seldom seen a man get through his 40s that he hasn't quit work and isn't doing anything but preaching and seeking more women.
Oh, man.
What's the ratio that you've seen?
I haven't really looked at it that way, but most of it in the Kingston group, the women were working at the businesses inside the group and trying to keep the families going, and the husband was trying to keep them going by running around everybody, copulating with the women. And oh my, he was just a big stud, out there having a good time.
They present polygamy as a lifestyle choice on sister wives, at least Cody does. But his wives say it's a matter of faith, their faith. Isn't it interesting that they're bound to their belief system and he has a lifestyle choice? How do you interpret that? The choice that we were given, when I talk about a lifestyle choice, we were taught that we absolutely had to choose polygamy in order to have our salvation made sure, in order to get to heaven, in order to be accepted by our family. If you didn't choose polygamy, you weren't acceptable. You were not okay.
That's exactly right.
And there was a great deal of psychological and emotional punishment if you didn't blindly follow and do as you were told. Is this what you have seen with the girls growing up?
The girls were really controlled. They weren't allowed to go to school because girls, they felt like it was harder for them, of course, because they had to obey and it was just unfair.
My father didn't want women to have education. He said that they were more difficult, and women didn't need an education. What education do you need to keep house and have babies and do as you're told? No, seriously.
Oh, my dad was...
How many of the girls were educated in the Kingston group?
After a while, quite a few of them got educated.
Wonderful. After a while. And in the beginning?
Nothing. Like, they lived in the cults, hidden in Bountiful, kind of in the countryside. And they wore certain clothing, and it was just a real cult. But as they got older and they were more indoctrinated and controlled, they allowed them to go to school. And some of them went to college.
And some had that opportunity.
Really.
Very few per capita get that opportunity.
And it just, it's just really... They're different than the rest of them. Each group has their own little technique, their style.
But each group believes that their leader is God's mouthpiece on earth, and he's the only one that's right. Is that not correct?
Oh, yeah.
And don't you find that ironic that the girls can be shuffled off to be married and intermarried throughout all the groups without paying any attention to which man is God's mouthpiece on earth? She just goes because her dad said.
Now, the Kingstons, they don't want them to leave the group.
They don't let their girls marry outside?
They don't want them to. They want everybody within. They want the growth from within. And
so they have a larger intermarriage ratio, you think?
Oh, yes.
There's a large intermarriage ratio in Colorado City, so much that pharmacy disease is the highest in the world there, and that's caused from interbreeding.
Yeah. I'm sure that Kingstons have different symptoms of how they've done it too, the kids and how they different genetic defects. No, they had the fingernails were different, was one of them, and they just had little genetic traits that were made them, you could identify them by their genetic traits. As far as I'm concerned, polygamy is committing adultery, a legalization of adultery for men.
Isn't it interesting, though, that Joe Darker, the author of Love Times 3, claims that his loyalty is even greater because if he was to cheat, he'd be cheating on 3 women. How do you define that?
Just 3, huh?
Well, I think if he's with one of them, he's cheating on the other 2.
Yeah.
I wonder if Joe Darker would have the same desire to decriminalize polygamy if he knew that his wives would have the same right he had, that he wants the freedom of sexuality to sleep with who he wants, when he wants, but he doesn't want that for his wives, not even one of them, and we all know that. If a man had to share the only wife he would ever have and listen to her take a new lover every time she wanted one in the next bedroom, he probably couldn't take it. But he tells those women that they are immoral if they have negative feelings about that. I've been told that I was immoral because I didn't want my husband to have other women. I was told that I was evil and the spirit of the devil was in me because I had hatred and jealousy behind my eyes, you could tell, or I wouldn't be hurt. So I was evil and immoral. And if I wasn't immoral, I wouldn't see it as immoral. I would know that he was doing a godly act by spreading his holy seed where God wanted him to.
Oh, my.
Oh, my.
Oh, yeah.
Have you experienced some of those little gems?
Nope, I haven't. We were, the way we lived it was a little bit, well, if you had to live it, I think I would do it the way that we had chosen. And we had more freedom, and we wanted education for our children and ourselves as well. And see, my sister had gone to school, learned to be a nurse, and her husband had gone to law school and graduated. But what was crazy was after he graduated, the leader was jealous that he married my sister, and he wanted to marry her. The leader, John Ortell.
Yeah.
Well, he told, well, you could practice law.
And because he was God's mouthpiece on earth, then Leon had to obey.
Right.
A lot of people don't really understand that this blind obedience to the leader can cripple a man's entire life. What are some of the things that happened to some of the guys? Leon gave up his career. What else? What else?
Well, they were rules. As time went on, each leader was a little bit different.
Well, the leadership is always fluctuating according to the narcissistic behavior of the leader.
Yeah.
In other words, if the guy's a real narcissist, you've got Warren Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them are a little more benevolent. But for a man, any man, to stand up and say, me having a complete multitude of sexual partners and mates is going to take me to heaven and make me a god and make you a slut, that is a narcissistic behavior. He's the only one that has breeding rights.
Right.
And in Africa and some other countries, they actually mutilate the women sexually so that they could never enjoy sex, because they are not in it to please the women, they're in it to please themselves. And if a woman were pleased, she may have more temptation to leave.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that. Because they have the power. The men. They can do that, whatever they want.
Well, here's the irony. They want now, today, in Utah, to have the right to have the sexual freedom to choose the partners they want, but they don't want any responsibility to go with it. They don't want it, they want it decriminalized, because if they legalized it, they'd have to accept the responsibility, the legal financial responsibility for their children and everything that goes with it. And they never have done that. Now, there's a few exceptions to the rule, of course. But the men that take care of their families are usually the ones at the top of the totem pole receiving all the tithing, and everybody's working for them.
Yeah.
And, of course, they have the most women, but even when they have the most women, they don't take good care of their families, because the emotional and psychological and educational needs as well as the health needs just aren't met.
Yep, exactly.
I would like you to share with me some of the human rights violations that you've seen in polygamy, some of the common ones.
First of all, you have to lie about who you are, your real identity. You don't have an identity. You have what they have created for you. And you have to match that. Be that they said. Just children have fraudulent birth certificates. They don't have the right to call a man dad. They're all controlled. It's just the biggest mess. It's just unbelievable.
The very men that will not give these women the right to be a legal wife, or the children the right to have a legal father, are the same men that own and control them and expect blind obedience, or they're going to suffer the consequences. What do these men do to enforce this blind obedience?
I think that our family lived it more freely and as good as you could under the circumstances. I know I was never allowed to fall in love. I never have known what that was like, to love a man sexually, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I couldn't conjure that up. Heck, I got along better with my brothers and had more fun with them than I ever did with the husband. They take everything away from you.
We define everything.
Your real emotions, you can't have them, because it would make it difficult for the husband and the people living polygamy. You have to lie. You have to treat all this stuff under a lie.
And do you believe that the sister wives show, the women that get up there and say how wonderful polygamy is, they're living that lie that they have to live in order to get their salvation?
Yep.
I have seen many women back and endorse polygamy until they got out of it and away from it, and then they spoke just the opposite and said, well, I had to do that, I was there.
Yep, and it is a concentration camp. Yeah. It's horrific for some of the people. It really is, because of the men aren't educated very well, haven't gone to school, any school. They have been treated unfairly as children. They have been, their father has been cruel to them and won't let them identify themselves as their father. They needed professional help.
The polygamous kids do need professional help. They have been brainwashed into believing that there's a bloodthirsty and terrifying God that's going to destroy them if they don't do these things.
And that's, when you said that, I thought, that's right. I remember I wanted to bring that out, that there is not a God of love. They never talk about love. No. You shouldn't love. You can't love.